She tried to end her life in the river, but the prince pulled her out and said, "Live with me instead." The river is cold, the dawn mist rising, and a broken young woman believes her life is over. But when strong arms drag her back to shore, the world shifts in an instant. He is no ordinary man heir to a throne, chained by duty to marry another. She is just a seamstress, yet in her hands lies courage that will shake a kingdom, but whispers echo through the palace halls. Jealous eyes watch, and behind every candlelit corridor lurks the thread of scandal, war, and betrayal. What happens when a servant's dignity defies a king's decree? And when love itself is branded treason? Will their hearts survive or be torn apart forever? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The mists hung heavy over the Danube as dawn's first light crept across the Austrian sky. Thin golden rays pierced the morning fog, casting an ethereal glow over the rushing waters. The river moved swift and dark, its surface broken by swirling eddies that spoke of dangerous depths below. Along its muddy banks walked Magdalena, her feet bare and cold against the damp earth. Her simple dress, worn thin from endless mending, offered little protection against the spring chill. At 23, her face bore the weary lines of one who had known too much hardship too soon. The weight of her father's unpaid debts pressed down upon her shoulders like a physical burden. "Father," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek, "forgive me." The honest tradesman had taught her dignity in work. But now even her skillful hands at the seamstress's table could not keep the creditors at bay. Each passing day brought fresh demands, harsh words, and the creeping shadow of debtor's prison. The mud squished between her toes as she moved closer to the water's edge. The current tugged at her skirts as she waded in, the icy water stealing her breath. Still, she pressed forward, letting the river pull her deeper. The cold numbed her legs, then her waist, till finally the current caught her fully in its grip. Along the riverside path, obscured by the morning mist, rode a solitary figure. Prince Albrecht of Hohenberg sat tall in his saddle, his fine cloak drawn close against the dawn chill. Though born to privilege, his heart was restless, seeking something beyond the gilded cage of court life. Through the shifting fog, he caught sight of a shape in the water, a woman struggling against the current. Without a moment's hesitation, Albrecht leaped from his mount. His practiced hands flew to the clasp of his cloak, casting it aside. The prince plunged into the frigid river, powerful strokes carrying him toward the drowning figure. The current fought him, but years of military training had prepared him for such trials. His strong arms encircled Magdalena's waist, and he pulled her toward the shore with determined strokes. They emerged from the water, both coughing and gasping. Magdalena lay half-conscious on the muddy bank, her dark hair plastered to her face. As awareness returned, shame flooded her features. "Leave me," she pleaded weakly, turning away from her rescuer. "I have nothing left." But Albrecht would not be dismissed. He retrieved his discarded cloak, still dry where it had fallen, and wrapped it carefully around her trembling shoulders. The fine fabric, warm and soft, carried the subtle scent of cedar and nobility. Kneeling beside her, he caught her gaze with his own. His voice, though quiet, carried the strength of absolute conviction. "If life has abandoned you," he whispered passionately, "then live with me instead." Magdalena stared up at him, stunned by his words. The morning mist swirled around them like a veil, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. She saw then what her despair had hidden, that this stranger's eyes held not pity, but a deep and genuine concern that pierced straight to her heart. Rising smoothly to his feet, Albrecht whistled for his horse. The animal approached obediently, its hooves leaving deep prints in the soft earth. "You must allow me to escort you to shelter," he insisted, his tone brooking no argument. "You'll catch your death in these wet clothes." too weak to resist, and, still wrapped in the warmth of his cloak, Magdalena could only nod. With gentle hands, he helped her rise and steadied her beside his mount. They set off toward the city in silence. The only sounds, the soft clip of hooves on the path and the eternal rushing of the Danube behind them. The morning mist began to lift, revealing the spires of Vienna in the distance. As if drawing a veil back from a world Magdalena had thought lost to her forever, the carriage wheels clattered over Vienna's cobblestones, jostling its occupants as they made their way through the awakening city. Magdalena sat huddled in the stranger's fine cloak, her hair still damp from the river. Beside her, the man who had saved her life maintained a respectful distance, his eyes occasionally finding hers with gentle concern. The morning sun had burned away the river mists. By the time they reached an inn near the palace gates, it was a respectable establishment, its weathered sign depicting a golden crown. The mysterious rescuer helped Magdalena down from the carriage, his strong hands steady as she found her footing on trembling legs. "You must be chilled to the bone," he said softly, guiding her through the inn's heavy wooden door. The common room was warm and clean, with morning sunlight streaming through leaded windows. "Some hot broth and mulled wine will set you right." He led her to a private corner table and signaled the innkeeper, ordering as if she were a lady of quality rather than a mere seamstress. Magdalena clutched the borrowed cloak tighter, acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance and bare feet. "I cannot repay such kindness, sir," she whispered, her voice still rough from the river water. "Your name would be payment enough," he replied with a gentle smile that made her heart flutter despite her misery. "Magdalena," she answered, accepting the steaming cup of wine he offered. "Magdalena Weber." The broth arrived, rich with vegetables and herbs. As she ate, the warmth slowly returned to her limbs, and with it came shame at what she had attempted. Her mysterious benefactor waited patiently, his manner both courteous and careful, as if afraid she might flee. "Tell me what drove you to the river this morning," he said at last, his voice low and free of judgment. The kindness in his eyes broke something inside her. The story spilled out like water from a cracked vessel: her father's death 6 months past, the mounting debts, the lonely struggle to maintain her small seamstress shop. "I lost our last paying customer yesterday," she finished, staring into her empty bowl. "Without references or connections, no fine lady will trust their silks to my needle." Her rescuer was quiet for a long moment. "You have skill with a needle, then?" "My father made sure I learned a trade. He said honest work was its own nobility." Fresh tears threatened at the memory. "Your father was wise." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "What if I told you there might be a position for you at the Hohenberg Palace?" Magdalena's eyes widened. "The palace, but surely they always need skilled hands," he interrupted smoothly. "And I happen to know the palace steward." He rose from the table. "Wait here. Let me send for him." Before she could protest, he had gone to speak with the innkeeper. Magdalena sat in confused wonder, watching through the window as a boy ran off with a message. Within the hour, a tall man in severe black clothing arrived at the inn. The palace steward had a stern face but kind eyes as he assessed Magdalena. Her rescuer spoke quietly with the steward, who nodded several times while examining what appeared to be a letter. Magdalena caught fragments of their conversation, references to her skills, her situation, the need for discretion. The steward treated her savior with the deference due a minor noble, though his plain dress suggested no such rank. "Miss Weber," the steward finally addressed her, "if you are willing, there is a position available in the servants' wing. You would assist with the palace linens and the ladies' wardrobes. Room and board provided, of course." Magdalena looked at her mysterious benefactor, who smiled encouragingly. What choice did she have? She owed him her life. "I would be most grateful for the opportunity, sir." As darkness fell that evening, Magdalena followed the steward through the palace gates. Torches flickered in iron brackets, casting dancing shadows on the ancient stones. The servants' wing was larger than any house she had ever seen. Its corridors lit by dozens of beeswax candles that filled the air with sweet smoke. Her small room, when they reached it, was clean and warm, with a narrow bed and a window overlooking the palace gardens. Magdalena stood at that window long after the steward left her, gazing at the grand illuminated windows of the main palace. Somewhere in those glittering halls walked the man who had saved her life, a minor noble, she assumed, whose name she had never thought to ask. Little did she know that her rescuer was none other than Prince Albrecht himself, heir to the throne of Hohenberg, who even now stood at his own window. Thinking of the brave seamstress he had pulled from the river at dawn, morning light filtered weakly through the high windows of the palace sewing chamber, where Magdalena sat among a cluster of seamstresses. Her fingers moved steadily through rich fabric as she adjusted to her new surroundings. The room buzzed with whispered conversations about the upcoming spring ball, while silks and velvets rustled beneath busy hands. "Mind those stitches extra careful on her ladyship's gown," the head seamstress instructed, peering over Magdalena's shoulder. "Those crystals cost more than we earn in a year." Magdalena nodded, grateful for the work that kept her hands and mind occupied. Better to focus on tiny stitches than remember yesterday's darkness at the river. The familiar motion of needle and thread brought comfort, even as her shoulders ached from hunching over the delicate beadwork. A commotion in the hallway drew everyone's attention. The heavy oak door stood open, allowing glimpses of nobles passing by in their morning finery. Magdalena's heart nearly stopped as she caught sight of a familiar figure, but transformed. Gone were the simple riding clothes. In their place, her rescuer wore a midnight blue coat trimmed with silver, his bearing regal as he strode past with a group of advisors. His Highness Prince Albrecht, one of the younger seamstresses, sighed dreamily. "Isn't he handsome?" The needle slipped, pricking Magdalena's finger. A prince? She had been saved by the heir to Hohenberg himself. The realization made her dizzy. "Oh yes," another girl chimed in, "though it's such a shame about the betrothal. The Duchess of Lorraine arrives next month for the formal announcement, arranged since they were children." "I heard," added a third. "It will unite the kingdoms." Magdalena's hands trembled as she tried to continue her work. She felt the weight of his kindness, a prince, risking his life to save a common seamstress. Yet that same nobility now seemed a wall between them. Higher than she could ever climb, as if drawn by her thoughts, Prince Albrecht paused in the doorway. His eyes swept the room, settling on her for just a moment too long. Heat crept up her neck as she bowed her head, pretending absorption in her task. But someone else had noticed that lingering look. Lady Irmgard, sharp-featured and elegant in emerald silk, watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. As the prince moved on, Shu glided into the sewing chamber like a cat stalking prey. "You, new girl." Lady Irmgard's voice cut through, the quiet like a blade. A word, Magdalena followed her into an alcove, heart pounding. The lady-in-waiting's perfectly painted lips curved in a cruel smile. "I know what you are," Lady Irmgard hissed, keeping her voice low. "I have friends among the Riverside Guards. They spoke of a suicide attempt yesterday morning. Young woman in a threadbare dress. How fortunate that someone happened by to save you." Magdalena's blood ran cold. "My lady," I listened carefully. Lady Irmgard leaned closer. "If I see you trying to rise above your station, if I catch even a hint that you're reaching for something beyond your grasp, I will make sure everyone knows of your shame." What respectable household would employ a woman who tried to end her life? What would the other servants think? What would His Highness think? Each question struck like a physical blow. Magdalena fought to keep her composure, though her legs felt weak. "I understand, my lady," she whispered. Good Lady Irmgard straightened, smoothing her skirts. See that you remember your place." The rest of the day passed in a blur of stitches and worried thoughts. As evening approached, Magdalena found herself drawn to the palace chapel. The vast space was empty save for flickering candles and the comfort of silence. She sank to her knees before the altar, hands clasped tight. "Please," she whispered, "show me the path I should take." The soft sound of footsteps made her breath catch. Without turning, she knew who approached. His presence filled the space like warmth from the sun. Prince Albrecht knelt beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Neither spoke, but in the sacred quiet, their shared prayers rose like incense to the vaulted ceiling above. The afternoon sun warmed the palace gardens as Magdalena made her way along the gravel path, her heart fluttering at the unexpected summons from Princess Teresa. Stone cherubs watched from their pedestals as she approached the garden pavilion, where the princess sat surrounded by embroidery hoops and colorful threads. "Ah, there you are." Princess Teresa's face brightened. "Please, join me. The servants tell me you have quite a gift with needle and thread." Magdalena curtsied deeply. "Your Highness is too kind." "None of that now," Teresa said, patting the cushioned bench beside her. "I need honest company more than ceremony. These roses refuse to bloom under my needle." With trembling fingers, Magdalena settled beside the princess, accepting the offered embroidery hoop. The silk was finest quality, the thread pure gold. "Perhaps if we adjust the stitch length here, Your Highness, double, quotes as they worked." Teresa's warm manner gradually put Magdalena at ease. The princess asked about her life before the palace, listening with genuine interest to tales of her father's shop and their simple but happy life. "How wonderful to have such memories," Teresa sighed. "Sometimes I think the palace walls keep out more than just the weather." Their peaceful afternoon took an unexpected turn when Prince Albrecht appeared on his daily walk. Magdalena's fingers stilled on her needlework, her chest tightening at the sight of him. "Brother," Teresa called out, "come see how Magdalena has rescued my poor attempt at embroidery." He approached with an easy grace, and Magdalena caught the scent of leather and horse from his riding clothes. "The garden seems brighter today," he said, his eyes meeting Magdalena's for a brief moment. That afternoon marked the beginning of a gentle pattern. As spring deepened into summer, Albrecht found innocent reasons to seek Magdalena's company. He would pause during his walks to discuss scripture verses, his deep voice bringing new meaning to familiar words. Sometimes he asked about her father, listening intently as she shared memories of working beside him in his shop. During these encounters, Magdalena felt her heavy grief beginning to lift. The prince saw her not as a charity case or a servant, but as someone worthy of conversation and understanding. He spoke to her of his own duties and dreams, treating her thoughts with respect. "Your father taught you well," he said one afternoon, after she had shared a lesson learned in her childhood. "True nobility lies in one's actions, not in titles." The palace gardens became their sanctuary. Among the rose bushes and fountain springs, class distinctions seemed to fade like morning mist. Magdalena found herself sharing thoughts she had never voiced aloud about faith, about duty, about the beauty she still found in the world despite her hardships. Teresa often joined them, her presence both welcome and proper. The princess's friendship was a gift Magdalena had never expected, full of shared laughter and quiet confidences. Together, the three of them created moments of pure joy, free from the weight of court protocol. Yet reality was never far away. Servants whispered about the Duchess of Lorenne's upcoming visit. Court officials hurried through the halls with letters bearing official seals. Each reminder of Albrecht's true position sent daggers through Magdalena's heart. One evening, as the setting sun painted the garden in shades of gold, Albrecht and Magdalena stood near the rose arbor. The day's heat lingered in the stone paths, and the air was heavy with the scent of blooming flowers. Your presence here has brought light to these gardens," Albrecht said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Magdalena could respond, he reached for her hand. His touch was gentle, proper, just the briefest clasp of fingers, but it sent warmth coursing through her entire body. The moment shattered as voices called from the palace. "Your Highness, the council requires your presence." Albrecht withdrew his hand, duty calling him away. Magdalena stood frozen, watching his retreating figure, her heart pounding so hard she feared it might burst. Joy and terror warred within her chest, joy at his touch, terror at what it might mean. She remained in the garden until the sun's last rays faded, her hand still tingling where he had held it. The grand masquerade ball transformed the palace into a glittering wonderland. For days, servants scurried through corridors like busy mice, carrying silks and satins, polishing silver, and hanging crystal chandeliers with fresh candles. Magdalena's fingers were sore from endless needle pricks as she helped prepare the ladies' elaborate gowns. Each stitch a reminder of her place below stairs. The night of the ball arrived with a flourish of carriages and trumpets. Masked nobles swept through the great doors in jewel-toned velvets and gleaming brocades. From her position in a dim servants' corridor, Magdalena caught glimpses of the splendor through partially opened doors, ladies twirling in candlelight, gentlemen bowing with practiced grace, golden goblets raising in countless toasts. "Mind those hem repairs quickly now," the head seamstress urged, thrusting another torn gown into Magdalena's hands. "The Countess von Schönbrunn cannot be kept waiting." Between mending tasks, Magdalena carried silver trays of delicate pastries and wine glasses, careful to keep her eyes downcast as protocol demanded. Yet she could not help but search for one particular figure among the sea of masks. Then she saw him, Prince Albrecht, resplendent in deep blue velvet and gold brocade. Though a black silk mask covered the upper half of his face, she would know his bearing anywhere. The way he held his head, the set of his shoulders, the gentle incline when listening to others. Her heart squeezed painfully in her chest as the evening wore on. Magdalena retreated to a quiet corridor to repair yet another torn hem. The music from the ballroom drifted faintly through the walls, a cruel reminder of the revelry she could never truly join. Suddenly, soft footsteps approached. At last, a moment's peace, came a familiar voice. Albrecht stood before her, his mask now in his hand. Even in the dim light, his eyes shone with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your Highness," she whispered, dropping into a curtsy. "You should not be here. I cannot bear it any more, Magdalena." His voice was rough with emotion. This charade of diplomatic marriages, of unions without love. "The thought of binding myself to the Duchess of Lorraine, .. He broke off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Please," Magdalena pleaded, though her heart ached at his words. "Such talk is dangerous. You have duties, responsibilities. Do I not also have a duty to my heart?" He took a step closer. To truth. To the sharp click of approaching shoes on marble made them both freeze. Voices echoed from around the corner, courtiers approaching. Albrecht quickly replaced his mask. "We shall speak again," he whispered urgently. Then disappeared back toward the ballroom just as two noblewomen rounded the corner, barely sparing Magdalena a glance as they passed. Later that night, as she gathered discarded glasses onto a tray, Magdalena overheard a conversation that chilled her to her core. Two court officials stood near a window, speaking in low voices. "The marriage treaty is nearly complete," one said. "The prince will wed the duchess before autumn's end." "Excellent news," replied the other. "The alliance with Lorraine will secure our southern borders." Magdalena's hands trembled so badly, she nearly dropped her tray. Somehow, she finished her duties and fled to her tiny chamber in the servants' wing, where at last she could let her tears fall freely. She sank onto her narrow bed, her body racked with silent sobs. When her tears finally subsided, she rose and went to her small window. Across the torchlit courtyard, she could see the prince's chambers, warm light still glowing behind the ornate windows. Perhaps he too lay awake, trapped by duty and tradition. "Dear Lord," she whispered into the darkness, her breath fogging the glass, "grant me strength to do what I must. Help me find the courage to let him go." She pressed her hand against the cold window pane, as if reaching across the impossible distance between them. "Help me remember my place." The words felt like stones in her throat, but she knew they must be said. A prince could never be hers, no matter what her heart might wish. Some dreams were better left in darkness, like the masks that had hidden true faces at the ball. The early summer night lay peaceful over the palace until piercing bells shattered the stillness. Magdalena jolted awake in her narrow bed as shouts echoed through the servants' dormitory. Orange light flickered beneath her door, and acrid smoke filled her lungs. Fire. Fire in the West Wing. The palace steward's voice boomed through the corridors. Servants scrambled from their beds, gathering what little they owned as flames licked up the ancient tapestries. Magdalena rushed into the corridor, her thin nightdress offering little protection from the heat. All around her, people fled toward the outer courtyard. The smoke grew thicker, stinging her eyes as she helped guide others toward safety. Then she heard it, a desperate cry from the noble quarters. "Help! Someone please!" The voice was familiar. Princess Teresa, without hesitation, Magdalena turned back, fighting against the tide of fleeing servants. The smoke grew denser as she climbed the stairs toward the princess's chambers. Sweat trickled down her face, and each breath burned in her chest. "Your Highness?" she called out, coughing violently. "Princess Teresa." "Here, I'm here." The voice came from behind a heavy oak door. Magdalena threw her shoulder against it repeatedly until the latch gave way. Inside, she found the princess huddled by her window, clutching a small portrait of her mother, Magdalena. Teresa cried in relief. "The corridor, it's filled with smoke. I couldn't find my way out." "Take my hand, Your Highness." Magdalena pulled her shawl over both their faces. "Stay low and follow me closely." Together they navigated the maze of smoke-filled passages. Magdalena's lungs screamed for clean air, but she pressed on, one hand firmly gripping Teresa's, the other trailing along the wall to guide them. Twice they had to turn back from corridors blocked by flames. Finally, its cool night air washed over them as they stumbled into the courtyard. Guards and servants swarmed around them while bucket brigades fought the blaze. Teresa collapsed into Magdalena's arms, both of them coughing and gasping. "Teresa." Prince Albrecht's voice cut through the chaos. He ran toward them, his face ashen with worry. "Dear God," I thought. His voice broke as he reached them. Then, caring nothing for the watching crowd, he pulled both women into his embrace. "You saved her," he whispered hoarsely to Magdalena. "You risked your life for my sister." Around them, the gathered nobles who had always looked through Magdalena now stared in astonishment. The palace steward stepped forward, speaking loudly enough for all to hear. "I witnessed it myself." The seamstress showed extraordinary courage, Your Highness. She went back into the flames without regard for her own safety. Even Lady Irmgard, who had threatened Magdalena weeks before, stood silent. Her expression softened by what she had seen hours later. When the fire was contained and the injured tended to, Magdalena sat alone in a quiet chamber off the great hall. Her throat still burned, and her hands trembled as she sipped cool water. The door opened, and her heart leaped as Prince Albrecht entered. Without speaking, he crossed the room and knelt before her chair. His face, usually so composed, was raw with emotion. "I can bear this silence no longer," he said, taking her hands in his. "Tonight, watching the flames, thinking I might lose you. Magdalena, I love you. I have loved you since that morning by the river." Tears spilled down Magdalena's cheeks. "Your Highness, the treaties, your duty, no." He pressed her hands to his heart. "My duty is to love with truth and honor. You have shown more nobility in your actions than any royal birth could bestow. Please, I beg you, accept my love, accept my devotion. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Magdalena's heart felt ready to burst. All the longing, all the fear and doubt of these past months melted away. Looking into his eyes, she nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Albrecht pulled her into his arms, and finally, their hearts spoke what had been silent for so long. In that quiet chamber, with smoke still lingering in the air, love triumphed over every barrier that had stood between them. Morning sunlight streamed through the palace windows, casting long shadows across marble floors, still damp from extinguishing the previous night's fire. Heralds' trumpets pierced the air, announcing the king's return from his diplomatic journey abroad. The sound made Magdalena's heart skip. She knew this moment would change everything. Nobles and servants alike gathered in the vast throne hall, their whispers echoing off stone walls. Many still wore expressions of shock from the night's fire, their court finery hastily donned. The scent of smoke lingered in the tapestries. The palace steward appeared at the great doors, striking his staff against the floor. His Majesty, the King of Hohenberg. The king strode in, his travel cloak billowing, face stern beneath his silver-streaked hair. His sharp eyes took in the gathering, noting the smell of smoke and the tension in the air. Prince Albrecht stood near the throne, his shoulders straight, his jaw set with determination. Magdalena kept to the edges of the hall with other servants, her hands clasped tightly before her. "My son," the king's voice carried across the hall. "I returned to find chaos. Reports reach me of fire, of irregular behavior, of father." Albrecht's clear voice cut through the whispers. "Before you speak further, I must declare something of great importance." He stepped forward, and Magdalena's heart began to pound. "I cannot and will not marry the Duchess of Lorraine." Gasps rippled through the assembly. The king's face darkened like a thundercloud. Instead, Albrecht continued, his voice growing stronger, "I will marry Magdalena, a woman of true nobility of spirit, who last night risked her life to save my sister." Outrage exploded through the hall. Ladies swooned, lords shouted, and the king's face turned purple with fury. "Have you lost your senses?" he thundered, rising from his throne. "This seamstress, this nobody. The treaty with Lorraine has been years in making. I love her, father." Albrecht stood his ground. "And I will not sacrifice true love for political convenience. Love." The king's laugh was bitter. "Love will not prevent war. The Duchy of Lorraine will take this as an insult to their honor. Their armies will march. And for what? A distraction? A common girl who turned your head with pretty smiles." Magdalena felt tears burning in her eyes. The king's words cut deep, but the truth of them cut deeper. War, deaths, suffering, all because of her. "She leaves by dawn tomorrow," the king declared, his voice like iron. "I will hear no more of this foolishness. Guards, escort this ... person to gather her belongings." Albrecht stepped forward, fury in his eyes. "Father, you cannot." Magdalena finally found her voice. "My prince," she said softly, but clearly enough to carry. Everyone turned to look at her. "Please, do not fight for me." Her eyes met his across the hall, filled with all the love she could never speak aloud again. "Your father speaks wisdom. I cannot be the cause of war." The palace steward moved to her side, his face kind but firm. "Come, child," he murmured. "I will help you prepare for departure." Dawn came too quickly. Magdalena's few belongings fit easily in one small trunk, loaded now onto a modest carriage. The palace steward had arranged transport to a convent several days' journey away, where she might find peaceful work. She paused at the palace gates, morning mist swirling around her skirts. Behind her rose the towers where she had known both deepest despair and greatest joy, where she had found love and lost it to duty. The creaking of carriage wheels seemed to echo her heart's breaking. Turning once, she looked back at those proud towers fading into the pearled morning light. Somewhere within those walls, she knew Albrecht would be watching, as powerless against duty as she was against fate. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she climbed into the carriage, leaving behind all she had come to love. 3 days had passed since Magdalena's banishment from the palace. She sat in her tiny garret room, a single candle flickering as her needle wove through coarse fabric. The room was sparse a narrow bed, a wooden table, and her sewing supplies were all she owned. Through the grimy window, she could see Vienna's crowded rooftops stretching toward the distant palace spires. Her fingers moved steadily, though her heart ached. Each stitch earned mere pennies, but she worked with the same care she had shown while sewing fine silks for nobility. Her father had taught her that dignity lived in the work itself, not in its reward. Still, her shoulders slumped with weariness as evening approached. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones drew her attention. A cloaked figure dismounted below, and soon heavy footsteps climbed the creaking stairs. A sharp knock startled her. "Who calls?" she asked, hand trembling on the latch. A message from the palace came the hushed reply. She opened the door to find a weather-beaten messenger, who pressed a sealed letter into her hand before hurrying away. Her heart raced as she recognized the royal seal Albrecht's personal mark with shaking fingers. She broke the wax and unfolded the parchment. His elegant script filled the page. "My dearest Magdalena, they may cage my body within these gilded walls, but my heart roams free to find you. Know that each breath I draw is drawn for you, each moment lived in hope of our reunion. I cannot bear the emptiness of these halls, knowing you walk alone in the city below. My love for you burns brighter than any crown or duty they place before me. Forever yours." Albrecht tears fell onto the precious words, smudging the ink. Magdalena pressed the letter to her chest, allowing herself one moment of pure joy before reality intruded. Quickly, she folded the paper and tucked it between the well-worn pages of her father's Bible, the safest place she knew. As days passed, troubling rumors reached even her humble street. Merchants whispered of unrest in Lorraine, of nobles outraged by the broken marriage treaty. More worrying were tales of dark figures stalking Vienna's shadows, hired blades seeking royal blood. Magdalena prayed more fervently than ever, both for Albrecht's safety and for strength to bear their separation. The letter in her Bible became her secret comfort, though she dared not read it too often for fear of discovery. One night, as summer storms lashed the city, thunder crashed above her tiny room. Rain drummed against the window panes, and lightning illuminated the cramped space in brilliant flashes. Magdalena had just prepared for bed when urgent pounding shook her door. Her heart leaped to her throat. No one visited at this hour, especially not in such weather. The pounding came again, more desperate. "Who is there?" she called, fear threading through her voice. "Magdalena, please." That voice, she would know it anywhere. She rushed to unlock the door. There stood Albrecht, his fine cloak drenched and muddy. But something was wrong. He stumbled forward, clutching his side, and she saw dark stains spreading across his white shirt. "My God, you're bleeding." She caught him as he swayed, helping him to her bed. "Assassins," he gasped, his face pale in the candlelight. They waited in the palace gardens. "I fought free," but he winced, revealing a deep knife wound in his side. "Be still," she commanded, hurrying to fetch clean linen and her sewing kit. Her hands might be common, but they were skilled. They had mended countless tears in fabric. Now they would mend this tear in flesh. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Albrecht's face. Despite his pain, his eyes held hers with fierce devotion. "I had to reach you," he whispered. "Only you." Magdalena's heart swelled with love and fear as she tended his wound, knowing that this night would change everything. The storm raged on outside, but in her tiny room, she held her entire world in her trembling hands. Lightning flashed through the small window of Magdalena's garret as she helped Prince Albrecht onto her narrow bed. Her hands trembled as she examined the knife wound in his side. Though not deep, it had bled enough to weaken him. Rain drummed against the roof tiles while she gathered clean cloths, her water pitcher, and the healing herbs she kept dried in bundles. "My prince," she whispered, dabbing at the wound with gentle strokes. "Who did this to you?" "Assassins," he breathed, his face pale in the candlelight. "From Lorraine, I suspect. They waited in shadows near the palace gates." His voice was weak, but his eyes held hers steadily. Magdalena crushed herbs between her fingers, mixing them with clean water as her grandmother had taught her. "This may sting," she warned, pressing the poultice against his side. Her lips moved in silent prayer as she worked, beseeching heaven's mercy for his healing. Through the night, fever gripped him. Magdalena sat beside the bed, cooling his brow with damp cloths, her heart aching as he tossed in restless dreams. Near dawn, his eyes opened, glassy with fever. "I cannot bear it anymore," he confessed, his voice raw with emotion. "This weight of duty crushes me. They would have me marry without love, rule without joy, live without meaning." His hand found hers in the darkness. "How can I lead a kingdom if I cannot even follow my own heart?" Magdalena squeezed his fingers gently. "Your Highness Albrecht," he corrected. "Please. Here, let me be simply Albrecht." She nodded, tears threatening. "Albrecht. I vow to stand beside you, whatever may come, even if it means living in poverty, sewing for pennies all my days. My heart is yours, though the world forbids it." He pressed her hand to his lips, his skin still burning with fever. "You are worth more than all the treaties in Europe." As morning light crept through the window, quick footsteps on the stairs made Magdalena stiffen with fear. But when the door opened, it was Princess Teresa who entered, accompanied by 2 guards in Hohenberg livery. Their hands rested on their sword hilts, eyes alert for danger. "Brother." Teresa rushed to the bedside, her fine cloak dampened by the morning rain. "Thank heaven you're alive." "When we found blood by the gates, ... She turned to Magdalena, clasping her hands. "You've tended him well. The fever is already breaking." "Your Highness," Magdalena curtsied awkwardly. "I did what little I could." "You've done more than you know." Teresa smiled. "Not just now, but before. The palace has been in turmoil since you left. The servants speak constantly of your courage during the fire, how you risked your life to save mine. Even the noble families whisper that perhaps love should matter more than treaties." Magdalena's heart quickened. "And the king?" "Father has grown thoughtful," Teresa revealed. "My testimony of your bravery moved him. And when word reached us of assassins from Lorraine, ... She shook her head. "Perhaps a marriage alliance with them would bring more danger than peace. The people support us." Albrecht asked, sitting up slightly despite his wound. "They do," Teresa nodded. "From highest lord to lowest servant, they speak of Magdalena's noble heart. How she proves that true worth comes not from birth, but from character." She smiled. "It seems saving a princess wins more favor than any title could." Magdalena sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "I never sought such support." "I only did what was right, which is precisely why you deserve it," Albrecht said. Color had returned to his face and strength to his voice. He reached for her hand once more, his grip firm and certain. "Magdalena, when I am well enough to stand before my father again, I will present you not as a servant, but as my chosen bride." Her breath caught. "But the consequences will be faced together," he finished. His eyes shone with determination and love. "No more hiding. No more denying what we feel. You saved my sister's life, and now you've saved mine. Let all of Vienna see that true nobility dwells in your heart." Magdalena looked from Albrecht to Teresa, seeing the same warmth in both royal faces. Outside, the storm had passed, and morning sun streamed through her humble window. Turning the raindrops on the glass to diamonds, the throne room gleamed with morning. Light as Prince Albrecht stood before his father, still pale from his wound, but straight-backed with determination. Magdalena trembled at his side, her simple gray dress a stark contrast to the silk and velvet of the assembled court. Whispers rustled like autumn leaves through the hall. "Your Majesty," Albrecht's voice carried clear and strong. "I stand by my choice. I ask your blessing to marry Magdalena." The king's face remained stern as marble. Lady Irmgard and her supporters glared from one corner, while other nobles watched with sympathy in their eyes. The palace steward stood near the great doors, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. Princess Teresa stepped forward, her blue gown catching the light. "Father, I must speak." She turned to face the court, her chin lifted. "When flames threatened to consume me in the West Wing, it was Magdalena who braved the smoke and fire. She broke through burning doors with her bare hands to reach me. Risking her own life without hesitation, murmurs rippled through the crowd. The king's expression softened slightly. "Your Majesty," the palace steward's voice rang out next. He bowed deeply. "If I may add my testimony. Since joining our household, Magdalena has worked with unfailing diligence and humility. Never has she sought advantage or glory. Her character speaks louder than any title could." Through the tall windows came a growing sound, voices from the courtyard below. The assembled nobles turned their heads as the chant became clear. "Magdalena, Magdalena." The king rose from his throne, crossing to the window. Below, a crowd had gathered: merchants, craftsmen, servants, and common folk of Vienna. They lifted their voices together, calling the name of the seamstress who had saved their beloved princess. "Your Majesty," Albrecht spoke again, taking Magdalena's hand. "The people recognize what I have known since I first saw her soul's courage. True nobility dwells not in birth alone, but in the heart's choices." The king turned slowly from the window. His eyes met Magdalena's, searching. She met his gaze steadily, though her heart pounded. "You would give up everything?" The king asked her softly. "Title, wealth, comfort, all could be lost if alliances shatter." "Your Majesty," Magdalena's voice was quiet but clear. "I seek only love's truth. If that means sowing in poverty all my days, so be it, as long as I may do so at your son's side." A long moment passed. The chanting outside grew louder. Finally, the king's stern facade cracked. A slight smile touched his lips. "Perhaps," he said, "it is time for Hohenberg to be ruled by love's wisdom rather than fear's caution." He raised his voice to address the court. "The betrothal shall stand. Let it be known that nobility of spirit is the truest crown." Joy erupted in the throne room. Princess Teresa embraced Magdalena with tears of happiness. The palace steward smiled broadly, and even some of Lady Irmgard's supporters nodded their approval. Weeks later, on a golden afternoon, Magdalena walked hand in hand with Albrecht along the Danube's banks. Her simple wedding ring caught the light as leaves danced on the water. Here, where despair had once driven her into the cold depths, now peace flowed like the river itself. She stopped, turning to face her husband. "Once I saw death in these waters," she whispered, touching his cheek. "Now I have found life eternal in love." And in thee, the river sparkled behind them. its waters singing of hope, renewed and love triumphant over all barriers. Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow, continuing our story.